Hey, welcome to PBR Monday, number 13 of 2021. Uh, I'll wait for the room to populate a little bit before I bring in my guest tonight, but I made a little video earlier with some brief announcements, some things that everybody needs to know. Number one is that we're going to have a writers meeting this year, a mandatory writers meeting. And I'll do this through a series of Zoom calls. I think most of you are probably familiar with Zoom due to the pandemic. If not, it's the easiest learning curve in the world. So we'll have some writers' meetings. I'll schedule some early in the day, some late in the day, some in the middle of the day. I'll do 3, 4, 5, 6, however many it takes for every team that wants to attend a writers' meeting to be able to attend. Now, when I say want to, you better want to because this is a mandatory writers' meeting. Most events have a mandatory writers' meeting. We're going to have one for this one too. I used to do them a few years ago, and we did it via some Google apps and stuff like that. But and then last year I didn't do it, and I regretted it. So we're going to go back to that this year. And you absolutely want to be at this writers' meeting because it's your last chance to talk about the nuances of the challenge point system. And I just want to make sure that going into this thing, you don't have any misconceptions about how things work before points are on the line. Because once you get out there and start riding, like if you ride day one and your PLB is not broadcasting or your web page isn't public because hadn't thought about it enough to know that you have to make your web page public, I'm going to have to tag you points. And I don't like tagging people points. I hate that. So this writers meeting is a chance to go through all that stuff. We'll talk about common ways that people have screwed up in the past and lost a point here or there. And talk about some safety issues I think everybody needs to hear. At least one person on your team needs to attend one of these. If you have a team, not everybody has to, although I would like for all of you to, but at least one member of every team needs to attend one of these writers' meetings via Zoom. And if that doesn't happen, if I look down and see that, hey, this team didn't have anybody, I'm taking you off the calendar. So I've already posted a thread in the forum. And I will start announcing the schedule of these pretty soon and just get into one. And they won't last very long. The second thing that I did is I promised you all for months that sometime in June I would put up a link for trails that have been sawed. And we're deep enough into the season now that a lot of trails are starting to get sawed out. That link is on, I put that link up in the forum today. So you can go in there. There's a format that I'd like for you to use. There are a few directions. And I saw just before I came on that a lot of people had already gone in. Well, at least 2 people had gone in there and posted up some information. That's nothing but great. We used to do a spreadsheet, a Google Docs thing, and that got too complex. So this is another thing. It doesn't get any more simple than just going into the forum and follow the suggested format. I cleared this trail. The only thing I'd ask is that you only address trails that are fundamentally cleared. And there's a definition of what cleared means in there in case I need to clear that up, no pun intended. But works in progress don't matter. I just don't want it to get cluttered. I want everybody to be able to get in there and very quickly get the information they need. So that's out there. The information about the Zoom writer meetings are out there, and we'll get through all that. The third announcement I have is that next week I'm actually going to be back in Kentucky, and I'm going to be visiting, among other people, the guests that I'm going to bring on in a few minutes. So Monday is going to be a little bit difficult for me to do a PBR Monday because I'm going to be probably somewhere over the southeast about this time, flying into Atlanta. So we're going to skip it next week. There's nothing really that we need to talk about after tonight immediately. And then as the tour gets a little bit closer, when I get back, we'll be, a week out. I'll probably just go through challenge points or something like that once again. I see a whole bunch of people on there. It looks like everybody's got their name tonight. They gave StreamYard their credentials. I love it when that happens. I like seeing names when that comes up. So hello, everybody. And without any further ado, I want to bring my guest in tonight. Before I bring this guy on, I want to tell you something about our guest. I did a rant a few weeks ago where I kind of went off on the racing community a little bit. I myself have raced motorcycles, both on and off road, and I have a ton of respect for really good racers. The thing I don't respect are people that have only raced and their entire ego is wrapped up in racing. There are a lot of people like that out there, but this guy's not one of them. Jimmy's not one of them. You know, you meet Jimmy, he doesn't talk about racing at all. He talks about how to ride a motorcycle. It's pretty awesome. But I have met people who, in both road racing and dirt racing, their entire psyche is wrapped up in the fact that I was a good racer, and they tend to view everybody as either fast or slow, and I just don't have any patience for that. As I said in that rant, you know, the world's a big place. There's a lot of people in it, and there's a lot of ways for you to make yourself through the world. But our guest tonight is the most humble person I have ever met when it comes to stuff like this. Because I had friends of mine say, "Do you know this guy?" You know, and then I finally met him because he became interested in the Tour of Idaho. And I about had to beat it out of him to figure out that this guy is a legend basically in motorcycle world. This guy has done some incredible stuff. But what has defined him, as far as I'm concerned, is not his incredible success in racing, which is just monumental. I mean, this guy is a well-known dude. This guy invented one of the coolest motorcycle adventures in the world, the Kentucky Adventure Tour. I have a close connection with this. We were talking a little bit before I came on. Yeah, I grew up in Kentucky, and I took shop class when I was in high school in 1970. I took welding class and machine shop so that I could learn how to modify the crummy bicycles that we had available to us, little Western Flyers with banana seats and ape hanger handlebars. We wanted to modify those bikes so we could ride them in the woods. They weren't good for riding in the woods, and mountain bikes were 25 years in the future. They didn't have any of those. So we'd take these little crummy bikes, and we'd tear them apart, cut them up. We'd weld them back together with bigger forks on them so we could ride beach bomber kind of tires and stuff like that. You know, derailleurs and stuff would get torn off, so they were all single speeds, and they were geared pretty low, but we'd go riding in the woods, and that's what we like to do. We like to ride trails in the woods. And the Kentucky Adventure Tour uses some of those trails that I rode in 1970 and 72, 73, 74, these homemade bicycles, homemade mountain bikes in the woods. And I was watching some of the video from an event called the Renfro Valley Dual Sport event that Jeff and others put on last weekend. And it was just like, it was deja vu. It took me right back to my childhood. The other connection I kind of have with a cat, and I haven't gotten a chance to ride the cat, but I'm going to try to cure that next year, is when I was still living in Kentucky in the late 80s and early 90s, that's when mountain bikes were first starting to get to be a big deal. And I've told everybody here before, the Tour of Idaho was actually invented in Kentucky. It wasn't invented in Idaho. And in 1989, some buddies of mine and I took Scott mountain bikes, which are what I sold in my store, and we did a lot of work on them, prepped them and everything, and we tried to ride this trail called the Sheltowee Trace, which basically goes through most of Kentucky from north to south, through something called the Daniel Boone National Forest. We rode some roads to get to the beginning of it. The first time we tried on Thanksgiving break, and that didn't work too well, the bikes got so full of mud that they wouldn't even go downhill. We'd had to carry them down hills and stuff, wash them off in creeks, and get on and ride again. And after 4 days of that, the bikes and us were just shot. We went back the following summer, and in August of 1990, we did it. And it was the hardest 7 days of my life. It was a Tour of Idaho difficulty thing, because the Sheltowee Trace, I don't know how it is now, but back then in most places, it was a lot like some tour trails. It wasn't very well marked. You're dragging your bike through these rhododendron bushes and stuff like that. You're riding down creeks in a lot of cases. It was a real difficult thing to do. And when I got to Idaho a few years later, I looked at the state and I said, wow, you know, there's a bunch of trails here. There's something called the Centennial Trail, but it wouldn't work for a variety of reasons. But there are a bunch of ways that I thought we could piece together trails and do something like that, except it'd take you 10 years to do it on a mountain bike. And that's kind of how the Tour of Idaho was born. So without any further ado, I want to bring in my guest tonight. Let me unmute your mic there, buddy. All right. Now, I threatened you with this before you came on. I want you to introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, and tell them what you've done. Then we'll start talking about the Kentucky Adventure Tour. And don't make me force it out of you.
So, I'm Jeff Stoess. I created the Kentucky Adventure Tour, and I'm a Tour of Idaho finisher. I think that's my greatest accomplishment accomplishment there is the Tour of Idaho finish.
Your greatest accomplishment is being you, my friend.
that was an accomplishment. That just happened. That's just an accident. I spent quite a few years racing. Started around 1990. Did a lot of GNCCs, local and regional races. Actually, did a year out best in the desert. But yeah, I mean, I had some pretty good accomplishments. Like you said, I don't talk about it too much unless somebody asks. Got a couple titles. I guess I'm the only person ever to overall a GNCC on American-made products. So that's kind of makes me a little proud, just because you don't see too many American-made dirt bikes, or you don't see any anymore. So
that's legend stuff right there. Legend stuff. I told you, Jeff Legend. That's your name from now on.
Well, thank you.
Tell us about the Kentucky Adventure Tour. What gave you the idea to do something like this, first of all? And then tell us how it's evolved over time.
Okay, so in 2007, I decided to ride the Trans-America Trail. Just kind of out. It was a short notice thing. I couldn't get anybody to go with me, so I just jumped on my XR 600 and I took off. I only had about 2 weeks, which only put me to about Moab. So this whole time I was thinking, this is great, but I would really like, not everybody can take 2, 3, 4 weeks off of work to do a ride like that, much less drive, ride all the way out to the West Coast and then figure out how to get back without riding a dirt bike back across the country. So I got to thinking, I've done so much riding in Eastern Kentucky, and Eastern Kentucky is, we all know, since the coal industry pretty much left out there, it's pretty sad. My goals were to bring more tourism dollars to Eastern Kentucky and a place for somebody to ride their dual sport motorcycles in a week's time and make it a loop, so they don't have to worry about, hey, how am I going to get my bike back to the start? So that's kind of how it came about. It took me about 6 years to put it together before I actually released it to the public. And ever since then, it's an ongoing. It's kind of like Tour of Idaho. It changes. Sometimes it changes 3 or 4 times a year. I'll go out and I'll ride and find new legal trails to take blacktop off. So I'm constantly trying to lessen the blacktop sections and add in dirt sections. So Kent and I are actually going out and some other friends on December 4th or July 4th to check out some new sections, and we're actually going to ride and then try to find some new stuff as well. So it's constantly evolving. With Kenself, I actually just bought a domain name and started a website. So it's KentuckyAdventureTour.com. I'm like you, trying to wean off of Facebook groups. So we're looking forward to that. Kent's really good at website building, so he's got some really neat ideas. But it is up and running right now, and it's looking really well. So pretty excited about that.
You use some screening questions just like we do for the CAT group.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that one of those screening questions is, what are you bringing, a motorcycle or a 4x4? What's a common answer to that question?
I see the answer of 16 an awful lot. I feel your pain, because some of these answers are just crazy. People read.
They don't. Reading is fundamental, and I got, when you told me that story, I laughed literally for days. On ours, one of the things it says is you need to have publicly available motorcycle content on your page. And
Yeah.
I look, I scan through the pages and see if I see any motorcycle pictures. And if I don't, the person doesn't get in, because there's a lot of people that try to get into groups like these for reasons that we don't want anybody in. And it's amazing the number of guys who I think are probably legit because they're friends with friends of mine, but they don't have any motorcycle content on their Facebook page, and I can't let them in. And then they're all like, why didn't you let me in? And I said, well, did you read that question that you said you read that says there needs to be publicly available motorcycle content? It's just, it's crazy.
Or there's one of the questions is, do you understand that your vehicle must be street legal to be on the CAT? They'll say yes. Well, the very next question, they'll say they're side by side. The street legal in Kentucky, so that either read it or they're not telling the truth.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing in the world. So
It is.
the cat is a huge, big deal. And how many people do you? I mean, I know you probably don't have exact numbers for this because, unlike the tour, this is kind of a serve yourself kind of a deal, right?
It is. Yeah,
How?
it's a download the GPX file and you can ride it whenever you want. There's people that ride it even in the wintertime. But man, number on it, it's tough. For about 3 years ago, Kent and I kind of did a poll, and I don't even remember what it was then, but it was a lot, and since then it's grown exponentially. Um, since then, so man, I don't even know, maybe 1,000 people a year
Wow,
stab at it.
wow,
I
that's
know I
incredible.
get these the I'm losing my train of thought, but the people in the counties that are in charge of tourism, the name of that department. But anyway, some of the people that's contacted me from those counties, thanking me for all the tourism dollars that it's actually bringing in, and little hotel owners and little restaurant holders. I've heard from them all, kind of like you have with Tour of Idaho. Yeah,
The, you know, the BDRs, the CAT, the Tour of Idaho, the TAT, all those are unambiguously good things. This little guy up in Chalice may not think so, but I think most everybody else recognizes. Juan just posted a comment. Trail economy is a good economy. The
yeah,
people that show up to do the CAT are a lot like the people that do these BDRs, the Tour of Idaho. These are not impoverished individuals. The people that show up to do BDRs have toy haulers, nice bikes, stuff like that. When they go into a little place like Elk City, they're going to spend some money. And
sure,
that's nothing but those people who live in those beautiful places cannot eat the scenery. They have to have some source of income. And Eastern Kentucky is not unlike some areas of Idaho where mining just isn't a thing anymore.
right, absolutely, yeah.
So, how did you find out about the Tour of Idaho?
Ken and I were talking about that not long ago. Randy Block is the one that told us about it, or he told Kent about it. And Kent had been asking me. Kent ran a race series that I race for a number of years, and he Kent has family. His wife's family is actually from Idaho, around Stanley, and he goes out. He went out there every year, and he would always, you got to come out to Idaho with me. It's the best ride you'll ever be on. And at the time, I never could get around to it. Well, apparently, Randy had told Ken about it, and Ken approached me. He said, "Man, check out this Tour of Idaho thing. I think we should go do this." So that's basically the way it happened. We planned it maybe for 2 years, maybe a year and a half.
Yeah.
Made our first attempt in 2018.
I remember you guys asked great questions. It was completely obvious that this was a strong team. And I was actually really surprised when something went wrong your first time. And that's the topic of tonight's show, what to do when things go wrong. And I sort of divided that topic up into four general areas where things go wrong. The first is mechanical, which is what gets the vast number of people. The second thing is navigational. There are some people that just they fail in navigation to the degree that they get lost or they run out of energy or something and they just can't continue. Medical is unfortunately something that happens occasionally, but you guys got nailed by kind of a combination. Mechanical maybe a little bit, but I don't think the mechanical would have been an issue had it not been logistical. And under logistical, I count weather turns unexpectedly bad.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of what I think really sank you. Why don't you tell everybody about your 2018 tour, and how it went up until then I think it was day 7.
Yeah, so navigation was actually one of our strong suits. I have a really big background in navigation just from doing the CAT, and I've just always had a fascination with maps, from my Boy Scout days, maps and GPSs. Kent is a GIS manager for the state of Kentucky, so mapping is his profession. He's an absolute expert at it. So we actually each did our own thing, mapping up, and prepared everything before when it got close to time to leave, and made changes where. So we started out great. We had pretty much a flawless run up until. So we got lucky in the desert. It rained when we left out of Pocatello that morning. It came a storm. It rained, seemed like inches.
I remember that.
In the desert because it was in the mid 80s. So the sand was wet. It was in the mid 80s. We got through the desert, had a ball. Somewhere up around day, it was right before North Fork. I smashed my foot really, really bad on one of the side hills there. I thought I'd broken it, but kept pushing on. The next morning, North Fork, it felt a lot better, so we kept going. We had both of our challenge sections done. We got to Elk City. It was really hot that day. Left Elk City and started heading over towards Lowell, and the weather started turning. So it started getting cold. It started raining. The time we rolled into Lowell, it was I don't know, maybe 7 o'clock. We were pretty cold. So we pull up to the Wilderness Inn there, and the nice lady that owns it took all of our gear, put it in the dryer, got it dry for us. We'd actually bought, we'd seen on the web that it was going to rain, so we actually bought rain suits to go over top of our gear in Elk City. So we get up the next morning and it's still raining. We're like, oh my gosh. So we put on our rain suits. Pro tip, if you buy one of those rain suits, make sure you get about 2 sizes larger than you normally wear, because as soon as I threw my leg over on the bike, the crotch completely ripped out. So, yeah, so that rain in the bottom's right there. So always buy 2 sizes bigger than what you think you would be wearing. So we left out of a low and started climbing, and it started getting colder. It was probably 38, 40 degrees. You're gonna rag on me for this, but Kent's hands were freezing. We were stopping every 15 minutes or so he could warm his hands up. I had grip heaters. I admit it.
You had what?
Yeah, I'm being honest. So, but
you know what I found out the other day that I didn't know? One of my KTMs has grip heaters, and I didn't even know it. I was scrolling through one of the menus, and it said grip heaters on and off. I had no idea that they were even on the bike. So now anymore.
I recommend them because it certainly saved me. Yeah, Kent was really shivering bad. We made it through Peak King and then all along that fire road that goes all the way to was it Fish? The lookout there, Fish Butte. Is it
Waldy? There's Waldy, and then there's Fish Butte.
The Fish Butte. So we made it to Fish Butte, right where the Fish Butte Trail starts. So I just my fingers are so numb I can't work my levers. And knowing that we were getting ready to go on Fish Butte Trail, which is it's pretty sketchy side hill stuff, he said, "Man, I'm going to have to bail." So I reluctantly I decided to keep going. Just kind of play it by ear and try to finish it out of soloist. So he went back all the way back around that long trail back down towards Low to jump on the highway and head up to Loksha. So I went on Fish Butte. It went pretty smooth. Then I got down. I was going to do Sherman Creek to cut off 40 miles. So I got in about 100 yards into Sherman Creek, and there was a tree down. There's no way I couldn't have got over it by myself. It was one of those. It was laying on an angle. So as soon as if I'd have got up on it, my skid plate would have got on it. It would have slid right down into the valley. Turned around, went back out, started in Fish Trail, made it to Ant Hill, and by that time I was soaked. That trail's so overgrown. Even the plastic jacket I had, it was starting to rip the sleeves. I wasn't too awfully cold just because I was working so hard. That trail is pretty tough. It's completely overgrown, a lot of rocks on it. I get to Ant Hill. I get up to that last big switchback. I had any problems with it, but that last one was washed out really bad. It had no defined line on it when you would go into the switchback. So laid the bike over. I got me a big stick and I dug out a line. Took me about 30 minutes. I got a nice line to hold my tires. So I get back on the bike. I go up to the point of the turn. I took it up on the back wheel, did a spot turn, and got to aiming up the hill. Shut the bike off, put my backpack back on and my helmet. Got ready to go. The bike just starts cranking. So it cranked and cranked. I finally started messing with the ignition switch, and if I held it between off and on, it would start, but as soon as I would let go of the switch, it would snap back to off or on and die again. So what happened was somehow or another the switch got waterlogged and it messed something inside the ignition switch. That particular ignition switch has a and it's an anti-theft thing. So it resists a signal going to the CDI. So if it doesn't have that right signal, the CDI won't fire. So I couldn't just cut the wires and hotwire it like I wanted to. Without that resisted signal, the CDI wouldn't fire the bike. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm done. Now I got to figure out how to get out of here. It was about 8 miles back to the road there. What's the name of that highway? Yeah.
Highway 12.
Yeah. So my only option was I kind of panicked, to be honest with you. I had a spot tracker. And the bad thing about the spot, I think it was a Gen 3 that I had, you can't two-way communicate on it. So at first I just hit the button. I can't even remember what it sends out a message that says something like you're okay, and you didn't need help. Well, it started getting colder. The more I got to walk, and I didn't really think I was going to be able to make it all the way out. So I hit the SOS button. That was my big mistake. I should have never hit the SOS button because, like you've mentioned in videos, it sets off a chain reaction that worries people that pre-programmed in, like my wife. And I think you were on there, and Kent was on there sitting up at Loxia Lodge and not knowing what was going on. So that was a big mistake. I learned that do not push that SOS button unless you absolutely need rescued. I didn't. I mean, I thought I needed it, but I didn't. Luckily, they monitored that thing and they could see me walking. So they saw me moving, so they knew that I was okay. So luckily they did not send a rescue party in. So my plan was to go back to there's a little cabin about halfway along that trail, and the name starts with an O. I know you're the one I'm talking about. It's a real cabin. So my plan was to go back to that cabin. I did have one of the emergency bivy sacks, and I thought, okay, I can bed down there and sleep the night out. So yeah, I like to kill myself walking in Alpine Star boots, carrying my saddlebags on one shoulder, had my helmet on. I had in my left hand, I had my tank bag, and in my right hand, I had my machete because Kent and I had got the bear spray in the van at Martin's house. We didn't even have bears at the time. So I have this machete that I keep on my bike. So I was determined if I saw a bear, I was going to fight it off with that machete, which is really dumb. So I would walk 15 or 20 minutes and I would have to sit down and take a break. And I was so exhausted before I knew it, I would nod off. I would jump up and think, oh my gosh, how long have I been asleep? Because it was starting to get a little bit late. So I kept doing that. And I finally got back to that cabin. The cabin had no door on it. The window was missing. It had a wood burning stove, but the exhaust pipe was completely rusted off. And of course, there's no dry wood. So I'm like, this isn't going to work. Baby sack out. It was wet. So I had no choice. I said, I've got to walk the rest of the way out. So I left my saddlebags there, and I did the same thing. I would walk a while, stop and take a break, walk a little, stop and take a break. So it got to be about 9 o'clock. It was starting to get dark, and I just made it out to the beginning of that trail. And it's still, my ideas was, okay, here's Highway 12 and see if I can't hitchhike a ride. Well, I turned around and looked, and there's a road that kind of goes off to the side down next to the Fish Creek. And there's a truck and a camper trailer sitting there. So I walk over to it, and it has a fish and game badge on the door. So I knocked on the door, and this guy in his mid-20s, I told him, he said, where did you come from? I said, I'm back Fish Creek miles. He said, man, did you walk out in all that garb? I said, yeah, I didn't have a choice. So anyway, I said, do you have any way of getting a hold of anybody? He said, well, yeah, actually I have a satellite phone. So he let me use the satellite phone. I called Kent, let him know what was going on. So he called everybody to let everybody know I was fine. And I said, well, how in the world am I going to get to Logistical? He said, well, I can't get you. It's a 2-hour ride by bike, and it was 9 o'clock at night by that time. So I asked the fish and game guy if he knew a way. He said, well, we're not allowed to give anybody rides because of liability. He said, well, let me call my supervisor. So he called his supervisor. The supervisor said, yeah, because of the situation, go ahead and watch it. So that nice guy actually gave me warm, dry clothes, drove me all the way to Loxia, got there about 11 o'clock, and he had turned around and go all the way back. But Loxia took care of me. They had food ready for me. They had the hot shower, that great little shower there in the campground. There was a lady that was working there. They stay there for 5 days at a time, the people that work there, and then they go back into town every 5th day. So the lady said, I get off at midnight. I'll drive you into Missoula where you can get a room. So that was our day of crazy Tour of Idaho. But yeah, in hindsight, don't use a spot tracker that won't two-way communicate. So in 2020, I got an inReach. That way you can sit there and two-way communicate, and there's no question on whether I'm hurt or I'm fine. That's the big. You use those inReach. I would get an inReach. I think Spot has a service now where you can two-way. That inReach works absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, the inReach has another feature that we all like better too, which is that the maps are better. Like when you put up the map page, it's a much better map than you see on the Spot page.
Yeah.
Now, I think, didn't Dan Hoheim help you guys out a little bit? I think we got a hold of him, and didn't he give you like a truck or something to go back in there?
Yeah, he was our savior. So he loaned us what he called his beater truck, which to me was it was a modern model Tacoma. To me, was a super nice truck, and I was like, we don't want to scratch up your Tacoma. He said, "Oh, that's my beater truck. My good truck's over there, that new Dodge." So he loaned us his truck. I actually had a key switch next day aired in. He loaned us his truck. We drove to Locksha, put Kent's bike in the back, drove almost to Lowell, drove his Tacoma 40 miles down a dirt road to Fish Butte Lookout, got the bike out of the truck. Kent toted me 5 miles down the ATV trail, which put us 2 miles away from my bike. So he went right to the cabin to get my saddlebags. I walked left to get my bike, switched the key switch out, and then we rolled back out, and that was the end of our tour, unfortunately, for the first attempt anyway.
So in retrospect, we're talking about what to do when things go wrong. What would you have done differently? Let's say you could have seen that coming. Done differently to address the issue.
As far as the mechanical, or
all of it, the mechanical.
Okay.
So I mean, absolutely, you would fix the switch so that it doesn't fail in the first place.
Yeah.
But let's say that's going to happen on that day. If you had the gift of foresight, you could have seen it happen, but there's no way around it. How would you? And you've talked about this a little bit. How would you have responded to the situation differently in a way that you think might have made the outcome go a little bit smoother, cleaner?
So we would have had a better plan from the get-go if something happened. If we did have to split up, we did not have that conversation. We would have had a plan if ahead of time.
You mentioned walking out in a set of Alpine Stars.
Oh, yeah,
What kind of experience was that?
Yeah, so a better pair of shoes would have been wonderful. Yeah, I did have a set of Keen sandals, but as cold as it was, that just didn't sound appealing either. But yeah, a nice set of lightweight tennis shoes would have been phenomenal. I would have ditched those Alpine Stars and left them in the woods.
Having walked a long way, I walked nearly 20 miles once in a set of motocross boots, and I said, that's never going to happen again. Even on casual rides, a set of those really ultralight Nike shoes that you could roll up into a little ball. Yeah. And it's bloody luxury when you're in that situation where you got to hike.
Yeah. And then, like I say, going with an inReach, absolutely 100%. I wouldn't do it with a Spot again. Just having that communication, it means everything. For not just you, for the people that's watching.
Back in the day when the Spot was the shiz-nizzle, and that's really the only option you had, my wife and I had codes. Like if you get this message, because you had, I think, like 5 or 10 text messages you could send that were pre-made text messages, right? Mm-hmm. And you could just hit a button and it would send out one of these 5, however many it was, messages. Well, 5's not enough. It doesn't describe the situation. Mm-hmm. So we had this whole code worked out. It was really elaborate. It was better than Morse code. If you get this message 3 times in a row, it means this. If you get it 3 times in 10 minutes.
Yeah, makes sense.
The inReach is way better. The inReach works everywhere. I've never had trouble getting a message out, getting it back. That's another reason, by the way, that I recommend the big one with the nice big antenna. That thing has never failed me one time. And that's something where I almost don't care how big it is as long as it works all the time.
Right.
Jeff, thanks for your time. Do you have anything else you want to tell everybody out there before we kind of get into some more stuff tonight?
Give the Tour of Idaho a shot. It's an absolute blast, but be prepared for anything that can happen. I know it's not possible to do, but do be prepared for as much to happen as you can. Talk about things like if you split up, what are you going to do? Where are you going to meet? Those kind of conversations. It seems silly in the beginning, but once you're out there, it makes all the sense in the world. Listen to what Martin and the Touricals tell you, even if it doesn't sound right. Like, for instance, I know you can't do this anymore, but Kent and I talked about not taking off in Pocatello. Now, I'm glad we did. We just said, well, let's just to take the day. We actually have the enough time to do it. Let's take the day off. I can't imagine not taking the day off on day 2. But yeah, let's listen to what people say that's done it. Even if it doesn't make sense now, it will make sense once you're out there.
Yeah, there's really nothing like this anywhere, and that, of
No.
course, I mean, you're one of the people that are one of my closest confidants. I bounce a lot of stuff off you because you are doing something kind of like this in your own. And the hardest thing is to communicate to talented people that, I get that you're talented. I understand that. I acknowledge it. But you haven't done anything like this before. This
No.
is something that's different. And even like, the movie stars, those guys were a blast to watch.
Yeah.
But we all thought any second it was done for those guys. And they'd be the first people to tell you that we didn't take this thing seriously enough and we should have listened more to some of the stuff people tried to tell us, including taking the day off in Pocatello. They didn't do that, and it nearly screwed them.
Yeah, and racing background, throw it out the window. If you go out there and ride it like a racer, you're done. You're done before you even start.
Yeah, well, what was that team last year? I think it might have been the second team that showed up, and they got to the flagpole. It was pretty late, but they made it before midnight. I was sitting there talking to them, and they said, "This trail's not marked. Where are the markings on the trail?" They were looking for those little fly arrows that you mark GNCC courses with and stuff. And
Yeah,
said,
no.
yeah, we're not.
No,
You're not
no.
going to find any of those.
It's funny. Some of the guys that I normally ride with, they watch my videos and they say, "Man, why are you all going so slow?" I'm like, going slow. And it is. I wasn't riding nearly what I'm capable of riding. But if you look at what we did, we finished day 1 by 6 o'clock, but we weren't. It's not because we were riding fast. Because we were riding smart. We were riding steady.
Yeah.
And time management is a lot to do with it. Not so fast that you're going to screw yourself. Not so slow that you're going to be late. But just a steady pace. And keep it moving, and that good steady pace will get you through that day quicker than going wide open.
Yeah, wide open is no bueno, man. Because as soon as you have a get off or something, then if your bike's okay, it's maybe an hour to get that bike back up off that side hill. If you drowned your bike at a creek somewhere, how long is it going to take you to get the water out and get it started? That's how you screw yourself.
Slower's faster on the TOI. There's no question.
All right. Jeff, man, I really appreciate it. I will see you in about 10 days, okay?
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
All right, man. Thank you very much for coming on again.
You're welcome anytime.
All right. So there you go. Jeff will. He watches this thing all the time, so he'll be with us the rest of the night. You can post questions if you want to for him, and he can see him and answer them if he wants to. What I want to do is, in the time we have left, about 20 minutes, I just want to amplify and reiterate some things that Jeff and I already talked about. Things are going to go wrong on the Tour of Idaho. I have never had a clean Tour of Idaho. Something has always happened. I've broken my foot twice. I've had all kinds of mechanical issues. I've been lost. I've come across trails that I couldn't find my way across. I've had to ride around fires. Everything that happens to teams every year, I myself have experienced. And I've spent my entire life, in sports where if things go wrong, it can be a problem. So I learned it early on to think ahead. I've known my wife now since about 2005, 2006. We've been married for 10 years, and she knew me when I was teaching at college. And she would marvel about, when a student asks you a question in class, you always seem to know the answer. That's pretty amazing. And I go, well, the reason that that's true is it's not a comment on on my brilliance as a physicist, because that's not true. I'm a pretty pedestrian kind of a guy when it comes to that. It's because I have thought about what questions are likely to be answered. If someone comes with something out of the clear blue and I don't know the answer, I'll just say, that's a great question. I don't know the answer, but I'll figure it out in next class period. Please ask me again, and I'll try to have a good answer for you. But I thought really carefully my entire teaching career, whenever I would go give a talk, a peer review talk at a conference, I would anticipate things that people were going to ask me. And it's after a while, you get a feel for it. You can't get the real off the wall stuff, but nobody pays attention to that anyway. But you should at least have thought through the things that you're most likely to be asked. The same thing is true in outdoor adventures. When I was climbing, I checked the weather reports. What's going to happen if all of a sudden on this alpine route, it really warms up, which is typically a problem on an alpine route because then all the snow and ice and rocks want to fall on your head. What happens if it gets super cold? That's typically not as much of a problem, except that it might get so cold that survival is a little bit of an issue. What's going to happen if somebody gets hurt? I always thought about those things in advance. And I think about those constantly when I'm planning tour type rides. What am I going to do if X, Y, or Z happens? And I develop contingency plans for that stuff. It's something that you can be doing right now that involves you in the Tour of Idaho, and it's a lot of fun. Now, we have a guy here that Juan Brown's on tonight, and he has a great YouTube channel. Juan's a pilot. You talk about guys that have contingency plans. People that fly airplanes are really good at this because, airplanes don't crash that often. It's far safer flying in a commercial airliner than it is driving your car to the airport. But when they do go down, a lot of people get hurt or die, and it's a big deal. It makes headlines. The airlines don't want that to happen. So these pilots, man, they're really good at this. They've got notebooks full of what do I do if things start to go wrong, and they go right down the list. You need to do that too. You need to adopt that kind of thinking for the Tour of Idaho. So again, I see things falling into basically 4 categories of things going wrong. The first is a mechanical. Those are really common. People develop mechanical problems. Your bike is going to get the crap beat out of it in the Tour of Idaho. And the little things I flat out wouldn't worry about. You can finish the Tour of Idaho on just your rear brakes. I've done it before. Front brakes would be better, but if it's just the rears, you can do that. I finished with no oil left in my front shocks before. I finished on a bike that was barely running before. As long as that thing will keep rolling north, I would keep rolling north until I had to start using like a wheelbarrow. Then I would stop. But most of the time, if you are a reasonably good mechanic, and you should be if you're planning on spending a lot of time in the middle of nowhere with the motorcycle. You heard Jeff talk about that switch. He knew everything about that switch. He knew everything about that motorcycle, and he kind of understood he was knackered when he figured out what the problem is. Jimmy Lewis, in the video that he made, talks about his fuel injection going kaput. And he knew if it was really a broken fuel injection, that was bad, but he also knew how unlikely that was. And he finally found the push-pull connector that had just worked its way loose, and he got it all fixed. There are some things you can't fix. You blow a motor or something, there's no sense bringing enough tools to fix something like that because you don't have time to do it. But you should practice patching a tire if you've never done it before you come out in your tour, practice it. That's also the reason why I don't recommend moose, although I'm getting closer and closer to being able to do that. Tubeless, things like that, because I think dealing with those things, if something goes wrong, is going to take you a lot longer than just patching a tube and then getting back on the road and going. That's something that you can usually do pretty quickly, and it's easy to do. But think about your tools. Think about the tools that make sense to bring and the ones that don't make sense to bring. And try to think through those scenarios. If I have a flat tire, what am I going to do? Am I going to freak out, or am I going to just fix it like this? I've practiced fixing it. I know how to get the bead off the rim with simple tools. I've got everything I need to do. This kit I've used before. Practice all that stuff and think about it. Think through it in your head. Now, the other thing that really knackers people a lot, and it's the second thing on my list, are navigational issues. We had a very, very strong team last year, and I think those guys are probably watching tonight, so they know who they are. That they got a little fixated on the wrong thing at the wrong place and time, and a whole series of circumstances got on top of them, but it was the navigation that did them in. And they'd actually done a really good job up to that point. The other thing was that Garmin got hacked last year, or it wasn't Garmin, maybe, yeah, it was Garmin. And PLBs and stuff weren't working for a few hours one day. It was part of a hack. And those guys happened to need that PLB. If they could have sent me a text message, I would have told them exactly what to do. They were like 50 feet from the trail that they needed to be on. They were lost. They couldn't find it. And it was terrible because I could see on their PLB where they were. I knew exactly where they were. I knew they were in dense coverage with a lot of bush brush. And they were never going to see that trail. But if I could have just gotten them a message, I would have said, walk due west 50 feet and you'll run right into the trail. I know it doesn't look like it, but it's right there. Couldn't do it because of the hack. So, by the way, I do that kind of thing for people. That's the reason why when we get together in Pocatello, I'm going to make sure that you have my private number, and you need to make sure that you're in that you have me on your PLB list so you can text me through your PLB. Also, set up your PLB so I can text you. Make sure that you understand how to do that so that if I see you sitting still someplace for a long time, I can reach out to you. I don't have to wait for you to reach out to me because I get concerned when I see people in places that I know might be problematic and they're not moving for a long time. About 5 years ago, we had a fella who he dropped his PLB in the woods and it sat there for a day and didn't move. And I was going nuts, but the guy was actually okay. He was in an area the tour doesn't have very good cell phone coverage, but as soon as he got to a place where he could call out, he just said, yeah, I lost my PLB. And since it was still broadcasting, another friend of ours went up there and wrote it and found it. So navigational issues, the way you solve those is to make sure that you've thought through navigation, and please try to accept the fact that we are trying to help you when we describe our what seems to be an unusual method of navigation to you. You know, navigating from one waypoint to the next as opposed to following tracks. Tracks are what got those guys in trouble last year. Tracks are what get people in trouble every year. There's been team after team that has built their own tracks or gotten tracks from somebody else. And usually what people do is they just snap tracks. They create tracks by snapping together trails from these base maps, and those base maps are wrong in a lot of places, and you're going to screw yourself if you do that. The waypoints that we have, you all have looked at them, you've seen them, and you know those waypoints physically exist on a trail somewhere. There is a trail where those waypoints are. And if you can learn just to navigate from one waypoint to the other, just get on the trail and ride it. You're going to roll right over it probably. That's the best way to solve that navigational issue. But if you do get lost, sit down, take a deep breath, don't freak out. Start to think of myself, when was the last place I knew I was on the trail? Find your way back to there. Those guys last year couldn't do that because they rode down a steep hill. But, if they'd thought about it a little bit, and if they'd had good paper maps, they could have seen, look, if we contour around, we're going to run right into that trail. All we got to do is stay on this contour. We may have to saw a little bit. And in fact, they couldn't see it because of the brush, but they rolled right over a bunch of old skid rows. And if they recognized any of those skid roads, they could have taken it right back to the trail they needed to be on. They all led to the same place. So then we get into logistical things that go wrong. The weather turns bad. You get in one night and the room that you had reserved, you get in at 4 a.m. and there's nobody there and they can't let you in. You end up sleeping in the parking lot. Think about those things in advance. And the one thing that I tell people is make sure when you prepare for the weather, get weather reports everywhere you can. When you get up in the morning, don't put on your favorite thrash metal track and listen to it while you're getting dressed. Find a weather report somewhere. Find good ones. Get the Weather Underground app on your phone. Or the Weather Channel app or something for your phone. But learn a little bit about the weather. Learn what it means when you see a big front coming through, what kind of a front it is. And if you can do those things, that will help you plan ahead. And typically, the weather doesn't really turn 180 degrees this time of year. If it says there's a 50% chance of storms, that means there's about a half a chance you're going to get rained on. If it says there's 0 chance, you're probably not going to get rained on. Most of the time, the past few years, when people have gotten caught unawares on the weather, it's because they weren't checking the weather report. Sometimes I will even reach out to people and say, are you aware that you're getting ready to ride into rain or snow at higher elevations? And you need to know about that kind of stuff. Uh, the other thing that comes into play in both logistical and navigational considerations is alternative routes. What if there's a fire? What do the rules say? You're supposed to find the quickest way around, the quickest legal way around the fire, get back on the trail. What happens if there's a trail that you can't get across for any reason? Well, I don't want that to end your tour. Just ride back out, get around it. You'll have to make up the lost challenge point. If there's a challenge point on the trail, you'll have to make that up. Just by getting off of our route, you'll have lost a point already because there's a point penalty for deviation from the route. But you can make all that stuff up. If you get back in some place and you've already sawed 10 trees and you can see there's 100 more, don't do that. Go back out, go around. That's why we give you all of these opportunities to make things up. There's trails that used to be on the tour that are now bonus sections, and that's there to help you. Think about all that stuff in advance. Be thinking about that every single day. When I get up in the morning, what if this trail's closed? What if there's a fire here? Think about all of those things. Just run through them in your head. You don't have to come up with a plan down to every detail, but you at least will be altering your thinking and starting to burn in channels in your brain about how to deal with that stuff other than just freaking out. And then finally, medical. Make sure, do not show up here in Idaho without a first aid kit and some knowledge of how to use it. If there, you can take the wilderness first aid course that ski patrollers, climbing guides, people like that take. You can take it online these days. And in a lot of cases, it's free. You have to buy some materials and stuff, but you don't have to take the course. Make sure that you are a mechanic for your own body, because everybody I know has gotten dinged on the tour somehow. I've broken my foot twice on the tour, same way Jeff did. You're blasting down these trails. There's generally some side hilling. There's rocks and stuff sticking out. You're trying to stay as close to the uphill side of it as you can. You clip a rock and boom. Next thing you know, you've broken a couple of toes. That's so common that I would estimate that 60% of the people that have finished the tour have dinged their foot somehow. We've had people that have had allergy issues before. We've had people that have torn ACLs and things like that. If it is a medical emergency that is serious, the thing you need to do is let me know about it. Go ahead and send me a message. Then go ahead and hit the come get me button. Now let's talk a little bit about PLB etiquette in the time we have left. I'm going to talk about this a little bit, then I can field some questions if you still have them. Your PLB is one of the greatest things ever invented for outdoor adventurers. Back in my climbing career, I went to places in way up north, in Alaska and the Northwest Territories, the Yukon, places like that. I did these remote big walls where we would drive down a gravel road 300 miles that dead ended at a lake somewhere, and then you would get on a little plane, an otter or something like that, float plane. You'd fly back, you'd land on this thing that looked like a postage stamp sized pond from the air. And the directions were, come back in 30 days, we'll be sitting on this beach. If you don't see us, fly around, and that's it. There were no cell phones back in those days. There were no PLBs. There were satellite phones, but they costed, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and nobody could afford one. So whenever we did all that stuff, you were knackered if something went wrong. There was just absolutely no chance in the world that you could cry for help. You were going to have to take care of yourself. So people of my generation who have been, outdoor adventurers for a long time, we learned how to do all that stuff. We learned how to do first aid. We learned how to, to make sure that we could eat nutritiously so we didn't make ourselves sick over a 30-day period. We knew how to make sure we were getting good water and stuff like that. We knew how to fend off animals. A lot of times up in Canada, you're climbing these national parks where they don't allow firearms, so I bought a flare gun. Nobody said anything about that. And by golly, one night I thought I was going to have to use one too. A Yukon Bear about the size of an M1A1 tank came rolling into our bivvy site, and I had a flare gun at the ready. So I've spent my whole life thinking about those things. If you come from a race background, maybe you haven't thought about that stuff enough. You need to make sure you think about it. When it is time to pull out that PLB, the inReach and I think the newer spots all have two-way text capability. Make sure that you enable that. Make sure that you put me on the list of people that you can reach. And again, make sure that I can reach you. Just go in and they'll show you how to do all that when you set the thing up. And for mechanical issues, if anything that's not serious, go ahead and ping me first. Now, I answer questions for tour teams. If you pester me a lot, I may at some point say this is going to cost you a challenge point. But I will always answer your questions. There have been very few times when I've said to somebody, you're going to have to figure this out on your own. There have been one or two people that just, it was clear to me that they didn't do proper navigation. After a while, I go, look, I've helped you all I can. But I really will answer questions, especially if there's something I think that's pretty serious that's going on. Because whether or not you finish the tour, I want you to make it out in one piece. So I'll answer your questions. If, however, it's something serious, you break a leg or something like that, please let me know. But once you hit the come get me button, which you should do, you should be aware of the fact that that sets into motion a chain of events that you can't undo. And one of the things that happens is that it impedes your ability to start contacting other people. So you want to ping me first. It's a really bad idea to start letting your wife and your kids and your friends and stuff know you're in trouble. Because what invariably happens then is even if you haven't told them who I am, they all figure out who I am and they start calling me. So we had an incident last year that occurred on the first day where two guys came along and they decided to turn the first day into a race course. And they admitted they were racing each other the whole way. And you could see it in their splits, just doing some things crazy fast down some of these trails. It ended up on the boundary trail, and one of them got a spiral fracture of his right tibia. Really painful injury. So these guys, they did everything wrong once it got to this point. And I don't want to slag these guys too badly because they're nice guys. I like them a lot. But I think even they would admit if you forced it out of them that, yeah, we messed this up. So they actually had partial cell phone communication there. So they called me. They had my number and they called me and they told me what was up. And they said, by the way, we just hit the come get me button. And I said, okay, stay where you are. If you've hit that, there's already a helicopter on the way. And I was standing out in my backyard talking to them and I saw the helicopter fly over from Portland. So there was a helicopter en route for those guys. All they had to do was sit where they were. And 15 minutes later, one of them was going to be getting a free ride to Portland Medical Center. He could have had his broken leg, painfully broken leg, basically addressed within a half an hour. But no, those guys sat there. After they called for the helicopter, somebody came by in a side-by-side and they decided to take a ride with him. So they left their bikes, jumped in this side-by-side, and instead of taking a relatively comfortable helicopter ride, which would have taken 20 minutes, they took a 3-hour ride in a side-by-side, and the guy's got a broken leg. It was the most knuckleheaded thing I ever heard of in my life. I still can't believe those guys did it. They also had called their wives, and they called their friends. So I have search and rescue calling me saying, hey, we flew a helicopter out here and there's nobody. We see bikes, but we don't see these guys. What the heck's going on? I've got their wives calling me. That's too much bandwidth. In an emergency situation, if you just hit the magic button, search and rescue is going to come get you. All you have to do is sit there. Stay put. If you're going to move, do what Jeff did and move towards an access point because they can see you, like Jeff said. But either sit there or move towards a good ingress-egress point. If you're waiting for a helicopter ride, try to get to a place where the helicopter can land if you can. Whatever you do, don't hit that button, the come get me button, and then disappear. Don't do that. That's the worst thing you can do. I got earfuls from everybody on that. These guys' wives are mad at me. The search and rescue people are kind of saying, what the heck's going on? Do you know what's up? They scrambled a helicopter to fly out there and they didn't pick anybody up. That was like one of the worst disasters ever when it comes to what to do when things go wrong. Those guys made numerous poor choices. I don't want to see anybody do that this year. Those guys couldn't, of course, continue, but had they continued, it would have been with a significant point penalty because I would have docked them multiple points for what they did. That's something that's inexcusable. When you hit the magic button, wait for the cavalry, which will arrive. Always feel free to ping me about anything. Please let me know what's going on, but please be judicious about letting your wife and people like that know they can't help you. There's nothing that your wife living 3,000 miles away can do. Wait until you get out, then call her. The only thing that you're going to do by when you're laying there beside the trail and something's wrong, your bike's broke, you're broke somehow. When you call home and say, "Yeah, this is," all you do is you cause your loved ones to worry for no good reason. There's nothing that they can do. And when they start calling the authorities and fire, or I should say, shotgunning them with all these phone calls and stuff, all you're doing is slowing things down and causing confusion. So please, please, please think about that. If it's not something that's serious, go ahead and send it out. It's perfectly okay to send everybody a message because people will be watching you. Say, look, I'm not hurt. I don't think I'm going to make it to where I'm supposed to tonight. Everything's fine. I've had a brief mechanical problem, and I'll be okay eventually. It's okay to send out those kind of messages. But please don't send out the message that says, I have a broken leg and I'm waiting for help. If you send that out to your loved ones, it scares the hell out of them and it doesn't do a bit of good. Let me know that. Let the search and rescue people know that. It'll all get taken care of that way. That's the very best way to do that. So please don't ping friends and family in a true emergency. Just a I'm going to be late kind of thing, that's entirely appropriate. But, you got a leg hanging half off or something like that, or you got bit in the butt by a bear. It's better to let the professionals handle that. You can talk to your loved ones and your friends later on. All right. Any questions? By the way, I have spent a night out in the woods I've done 6 tours, and I think 4 of the 6 tours I ended up spending a night out in the woods. There's nothing wrong with spending a night out in the woods. You're going to be just fine. Sleep in your helmet. I carry that little big bag. I crawl into it. I wear all my clothes, put on all my spare clothes. If I got a rain suit, I put that on. You're going to be just fine. Maybe douse yourself with a little bit of gasoline to discourage the bears from coming along. And one of my favorite stories is I put a stick through my radiator of my XR 650R once on about my 3rd tour. And I ended up spending the night off the Magruder Road with what I thought was an owl initially, but it turned out to be a really big mountain lion. I mean, way bigger than either of my German Shepherds, which are really large dogs. And he sat about 100 feet away and just watched me all night long. It was a pretty incredible experience. Okay, let's see. Anybody have anything? I see lots of comments. Don't see anything that looks like a question. Juan Brown, I want to have you on here one night, buddy. I think that you are a reservoir of useful knowledge when it comes to adventure riding, so we'll get you on. Andrew Hickson asks, what is the success rate of people finishing on their first attempt? The success rate hovers around 20% every year. And I think that that's just the general success rate. People who come back typically have a much higher success rate. Typically, when people come back for round 2, their mind is right, to quote Cool Hand Luke. So they understand that everything we told them was true, and they understand that we were trying to give them advice to get them through it. So they've broken down all those barriers. They know that this is something that's unique, and they have their mind right. And that's what really helps people the second time around. Also, there is some familiarity with the trails. That doesn't hurt anybody ever. But I think mostly its mindset is a lot better the second time around. We got a team coming back from Texas. They made a good, strong attempt last year, and I still feel horrible those guys didn't make it. They got kind of screwed by hackers from Russia. But I think those guys would be the first to tell you that, look, we should have had our navigation a little bit more dialed, and this year they will. I think this year they'll take a fresher approach to navigation. And unless a meteor lands on them, I think there's no chance those guys won't make it. So in general, the success rate is around 20% every year. For returning teams, however, it's really high. There have been very few returning teams that haven't made it. There have been a few people that's taken more than a couple of tries, a few soloists and maybe 1 or 2 teams. But the success rate is much, much higher. I would estimate, I haven't ever teased that data out, but I would estimate it's over 80% for second time around. What we have here is a failure to communicate. I would answer that by saying, Lord, whatever I've done wrong in my life, please don't strike me blind in the next 5 minutes. Those of you who know Cool Hand Luke know what I'm talking about. Well, once again, I've wasted an entire hour of your life with this ridiculous thing known as PBR Monday. Once again, I will not be here next week. I'm going to be in the air about this time next Monday night on my way to Kentucky to see Jeff Legend, among other people back there. I have my reasons for going back are not entirely happy. When you're as old as I am and you go back to where you grew up, it's typically for funerals and things like that. So I got some business along those lines I got to attend to next week. So no PBR Monday next week, but we will do one the following week. Please make sure that you that you pay attention to that thread where we talk about riders meeting. Make sure that if you have been out sawing trails, and again I know some of you have, you populate that thread in the forum that talks about trail clearing and stuff like that. A couple weeks ago, I asked Stoess to PM me if you were interested in doing a more interesting route through the desert. Nobody did, so at this point, I'm just going to assign the mystery routes through the desert at random. I think I'm up to about 24, 25 now. I'm working on 2 or 3 a day. And when you, the way I'm going to do that once again is sometime in the evening of your off day in Pocatello, probably pretty late, maybe even the next day when you're riding day 2, since you'll have cell phone coverage in American Falls. I'm going to send you a spreadsheet that's got the directions to your mystery route in the desert. And the reason I'm going to leave it till the 11th hour is I don't want anybody trying to game the system and sitting down the night before and wasting your time trying to create a track or create a set of waypoints to follow. I want you to actually do navigation. So probably since everybody will have good cell phone coverage in American Falls, you're going to stop there for lunch. I may send it to you during the morning of day 2. And when you get to American Falls, it'll be on your phone and you'll be good to go. That's probably what I'm going to do. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I will see you in 2 weeks. I'll have a few little announcement videos here and there in that period of time, but gird your loins, folks, because it is the hammer is about to come down. Now it's let's see, it's the 21st day, right? Summer solstice, and so we're 3 weeks out. It's on its way. I'm really excited to see all of you. My feeling is that we have an excellent group of candidates this year. I think last year we saw a lot of finishers. It was more than 20% last year. And I think this year we are much more likely to see a higher group of finishers. For the ledger draw changes, are you updating the map or just the waypoints? I'm not going to bother to update the map. I'll just update the waypoints. And I meant to do that today, but I didn't get a chance to do it. I'll make sure that I get that done before I leave to go back to Kentucky. All right, that's it. I want to go outside and play. I got a swing set I'm going to put up tonight. See y'all later.